Hey, I'm Tad, the Associate Pastor here at Wilkesboro Baptist Church, and thank you for joining us for this recorded service online. If you would like more information about our service times where you could come join us in person, you can see those at wilkesborobaptist.org, or you can email us at info@wilkesborobaptist.org. We hope that you enjoy it. God bless.
Worship with you this morning. You can be seated.
Over the last couple, I guess since Christmas, we've been walking through the book of Hebrews, or Pastor Chris has, as we've looked at what Hebrews has to tell us, how we can draw near to God, has kind of been a theme that we've discussed. And if you've been with us, as you walk through Hebrews, you see that Jesus is greater than the angels. He is the imprint of God the Father. We need to hold on to Christ through his word. He gives us peace because he's the priestly king, and we can put our hope in him so we can draw near to him. It's kind of been the flow we've been walking through in the book of Hebrews. And so today I want to kind of add on and kind of take a kind of a detour a little bit, but it still is relevant, there we go, relevant to Hebrews, because we're going to go back to understanding why we can draw near to God, why we can put our hope in him. The writer of Hebrews says that he is the anchor for our soul. And I started asking myself, why can we do that? Why can we truly believe that God is the anchor to our soul? Why can we put our faith and trust and hope in God? And it comes down to Genesis. One of the very first stories that we pick up, it's the everlasting covenant that he gives us. God gives to his creation. And so we're going to look at that. We're going to look at what the symbol of hope that God established to us. So if you want to go ahead, you can turn to Genesis chapter 9. Genesis chapter 9 is when we're going to pick up. But I want to tell you a few stories. So my boys, I have two boys. I have a 12-year-old and a 5-year-old. And they have been fascinated, always fascinated with rainbows. I don't know if you are, I don't know if all kids are, but I know my oldest, he has been fascinated with rainbows. And I think he passed it on to his brother. And after a big storm, especially in the summer, we have those storms that just pop up and we just get drenched. And it just seems like everything goes dark really quickly. And they'll want to drive around to go find a rainbow. And we've done that a few times where we may have been driving and we get caught up in the storm. And so we drive around and we look for rainbows. And whenever they see a rainbow in the sky, they just start smiling and they start pointing and they start yelling at each other, "Hey, there's a rainbow. Look, there's the rainbow. Can you see the rainbow?" And, even if you see the full rainbow, right? It's one thing just to see a glimpse through the clouds. But if you see the whole arc of the rainbow, the whole bow, it's something special. Even I've seen adults stop their car, pull over on the side of the road to take a picture. Several of you are saying, "I do that. That's what, have you seen me?" But and if you see a double rainbow, it's even better, right? I know some of you are not on Instagram, but when I see you on Instagram, you'll see a big storm and you'll just see all these pictures pop up of these double rainbows all over the place. And it's like you'll hear comments and read comments of, "Hey, well, where'd you find that? Where'd you see that? I'm going to go get my picture of the rainbow." It's just a phenomenon that we love. But why? In scientific terms, it's just a reflection of the light onto the water particles. Y'all know that, right? It's just a prism that you are taught at the very beginning of how the color spectrum works. That's really all it is. But for us, it can't help but bring a smile to your face when you see a rainbow. Enough that you want to take a picture, and it comes from Genesis chapter 9. Because it's a symbol of God's everlasting covenant with his creation. Read with me in Genesis chapter 9, starting in verse 8, and we're going to read through 17. Then God said to Noah and to his sons with him, "I now establish my covenant with you and with your descendants after you, and with every living creature, and was with you the birds, the livestock, all the wild animals, all those that came out of the ark with you, every living creature on earth. I establish my covenant with you. Never again will all life be cut off by the waters of a flood. Never again will there be a flood to destroy the earth." And God said, "This is the sign of the covenant I am making between me and you and every living creature with you, a covenant for all generations to come. I have set my rainbow in the clouds, and it will be the sign of the covenant between me and the earth. Whenever I bring clouds over the earth and the rainbow appears in the clouds, I will remember my covenant between me and you and all living creatures of every kind. Never again will the waters become a flood to destroy all life. Whenever the rainbow appears in the clouds, I will see it and remember the everlasting covenant between God and all living creatures of every kind on earth. So God said to Noah, this is the sign of the covenant I have established between me and all life on earth. What a fantastic story. And we hear this term often, covenant. Now, this is the first time we see that word in the Bible. Now, there may have been a covenant that God made with Adam and Eve that we don't know. Some scholars debate that when he spoke to them, that was the covenant. When he told them to go forth and multiply, that was the first commandment. So that was kind of a covenant to them to go and cultivate, go and multiply all of creation. But this is the first instance we hear and see these words, covenant, between God and his creation. So the story happens, if you don't know, is God created the earth. Created it in 7 days. And he said, you have everything you ever wanted. And man decided, Adam and Eve decided that they were going to do the one thing God told them not to do, which was to eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And because of that disobedience, God said, you can't live in the garden anymore. And he went off, and they went, and they had sons. And their sons, Cain and Abel, had violence against each other. Cain killed Abel because of jealousy. And then you pick up and they continue to have generations and fill the earth. But as the earth continued to grow and as men continued, there was just corruption. It was enough corruption that if you look back at Genesis, I think Genesis 5 or 6, where it says basically God was grieving over his creation. He had built this peaceful place. He did it for relationship with his creation. He wanted to be bound with them and wanted to be with them. And yet creation itself had become violent. The total opposite of what God was. God was peace and they created violence. And so he decides that he's going to start over. He's going to wipe the earth of all living creation. He's going to send a mighty flood, and it's going to destroy all of the violence. And he looks at Noah and says, Noah, we're going to start over with you. You're a righteous man. See, God wanted to start this new covenant. As you can see in verse 9, he says, I now establish my covenant. So what is a covenant? Well, a covenant comes from the Hebrew word berit, which means to bind together. To bind together. Like I mentioned from the very beginning, God created the universe, created all of these things because he wanted to be a part of it. Unlike the other gods that we see of other religions where they create things as toys, as entertainment, God created it as out of him. And so he wanted to create a covenant. He wanted to be bound together. That's what a covenant is. It's just a binding agreement between two parties. Something that just keeps you together. So let's look at the purpose of the covenant. So we've got to look and we've got to reveal the purpose of this covenant. And the purpose of it is to recreate it. There was let's say there wasn't statements made, there wasn't, the principles were clear, and God saying, okay, we're going to make it clear now. What we did before, when we had all of the violence occur, we need to start over. I'm going to find one man who isn't wicked. It says he was righteous of his generation, and I'm going to start over. I need to let humanity know, let creation know that we are bound together. That's like any other covenant that we have, right? Some of you have a covenant with the bank. It's called a mortgage. That's what it is. When you buy your house, you are wanting to say to the bank, I am borrowing X amount of money and I am binding in an agreement with you to pay it back. That's what a covenant is. You know, there are other covenants. You could have car loans are the same way. Once again, you're binding an agreement with the bank. Maybe you have a covenant with your workplace. they will pay you certain amount if you work a certain amount, right? That's the covenant. We need these covenants to make sure we are establishing the grounds to move forward because we need a purpose. If we're just out here living life without a purpose, it's reckless. It could become wicked. So the purpose of the covenant is for create a purpose. Just an overall purpose. It seems simple. How about marriages? Marriages are covenants. When you stand before people and you say, I am going to be bound together with one another. In Christian marriages specifically, it says that when you're married, you become one. You can't get any bound together than become one. And that's what God is saying. I want to come back and be one with you. The world needed redemption. It needed redemption. And I know I've seen a lot of you shaking your heads and a lot of you going, well, it needs redemption now. It does, but back then it was worse. Can you imagine how worse it could be? I mean, that's what I went down a couple of rabbit trails this week because I was trying to understand what would cause God to want to completely wipe out the earth. Now, I'm human and I make mistakes and I have a temper sometimes and people say I have some control issues. And there was a song back in the day by New Song that called Start All Over on Mars, and that's what I would have done. Like I would have given up and I would have said, I'm done with you. We're going to start over on another planet. We're just going to start from scratch. But not God. But the wickedness was so bad that it was grieving him. One Asian scholar says that the flood was the tears of God. I don't know if I fully believe that, but it's an interesting illustration, right? Because we've all grieved before. We've all had things in our lives where we can't help ourselves, but we just have uncontrollably crying, and it won't stop. And it seemed like the world was hopeless. It seemed like people had abandoned God's blessings upon them. They had started choosing violence over blessing, violence over peace. In short terms, the world was chaos, which is the total opposite of God. Just take a moment and think about creation. Think about how the orderly manner in which he created the world and everything in it. It wasn't just, boom, here it is. It was a process. It was a process, an order, a standard order of how to do things. You know, you have light and dark, earth and water, animals, humans, and rest. And rest. It was a standard practice that he created to create order, because God needed to give his creation a fresh start of life. He needed to remind everyone that he is always committed to his creation. Even when things don't seem that way, he is in it. He needed to refocus and tell them, he didn't need to refocus, but humanity needed to refocus. The earth needed to refocus on their binding agreement with God. One scholar wrote that not until mankind's sin problem is straightened out will the proper balance in God's creation exist. And that's what it was. It was a sin problem. And he needed to balance it. That was the purpose of writing this covenant, was to allow them to see the blessings that they have. To create this agreement, this binding agreement, to tell you, I'm with you on this. I haven't abandoned you. He could have, but he didn't. And then the second thing he does is he creates terms for the covenant. And the terms are simple. Look at verse 11. I will establish my covenant with you. Never again will all life be cut off by the waters of the flood. Never again will there be a flood to destroy the earth. Simple terms, if you think about it. Because what is he asking us to do there? Nothing. He's not asking us to do anything. He is simply making a declaration saying, I'm creating the terms, and the terms is I'm never going to destroy the earth again. I'm never going to wipe it completely by a flood. I'm always going to have living creatures all over the place until the end of time. Like we know that. He says there will always be order from here on out. If you look back to chapter 8 and you see after the flood ends, he says in Genesis 8, chapter 20 and verse 22, as long as the earth endures, seed time and harvest, cold and heat, summer and winter, day and night will never cease. In other words, there will always be order. The chaos is over. Chaos will never conquer this world again. Chaos will never take ownership and become part and take over your life. There will always be order. There will always be seasons. There will always be a time. Ephesians tells us that there is a time, not Ephesians, Ecclesiastes says there's a time for everything. He's reminding us that because that gives us peace. For someone that likes order, someone that likes a plan, that brings hope to me. See, it says he was a righteous man. He was an obedient man. Something that was new to me that I never kind of paid attention to is during the instructions. When God's given Noah the instructions, God comes to Noah and says, Noah, build an ark. Noah, take your sons, their wives, 2 of every animal, take some clean and unclean animals on the boat and go get in the boat. Get in the boat, Noah. Stay in the boat. I will lock it up. I will close the door. You just go in. You survive the 370 days with your family on a boat. Yeah, I want you talk about chaos. 370 days on a ship with your family and animals and trying to keep peace. I don't know what would be harder, keeping the animals from eating each other or my family from eating each other. But he says, you're going to sit. You're going to stay on that boat and you're going to wait. The waters will go away. Eventually you will see the mountains. And Noah just sends birds up to try to find the right place, the right time to come out. But then then he listens for God, and God says, all right, it's time for you to open up the door. It's time for you to go out. And it's time for you to be fruitful and multiply. Here's the thing that I learned. Noah never spoke back. We have no records of Noah negotiating with God. We have no records of Noah saying, but God, what about this? Are you sure gopher wood is the right type of wood we should use for the ark? Are you sure the measurements are right? Are you sure we need 2 of every animal? Can I not leave the mosquitoes out? There was no negotiation. There was no conversation between Noah and God. It was God said this, and Noah did it. Noah was just obedient. He just did what he needed to do. And it's funny, if you look at when he gives the birds off, he waits 7 days. He always sends a bird off, usually on the first day of the week, on Sunday, not on Saturday. Because in his Saturday was the 7th day. Saturday is the day of rest. And so you kind of sense this pattern that Noah was righteous because he was obedient. Noah understood the peace that God could give them. Noah understood all of this. In fact, the first thing Noah does in Genesis 8:20, the first thing he does when he gets off the boat is he worships. He offers a sacrifice. And it says when the Lord smelled the soothing aroma, which the conviction part for me was, is my worship a soothing aroma to God? Just that kind of hit hard. I spent a lot of time trying to figure out what is a soothing aroma of God. What does that mean? What does that mean for us? And I can't tell you one thing or another. All I know is that Noah's sacrifice, when he came out, he was able to save some of the clean animals. So that means he knew unclean versus clean. He knew what was an appropriate sacrifice to give to God, and he did it. And God was pleased. Pleased. What a contrast we see before flood. God is grieving and weeping, and now we see God pleased. A smile on his face. See, he wants to fix our brokenness. God desires to make us complete and whole, and he knows the only way to do that is through him. He's the only one that can make us new. One scholar wrote, the preservation of the natural order from the powers of chaos is guaranteed by a covenant, by this covenant. He's saying this is how it needs to happen. And it's this simple. I'm promising you, I will never destroy creation by a flood again. I will never wipe out everything that has a breath again. There will always be something that has breath so that you can see hope and you can continue to be fruitful and multiply. Now, other scholars are arguing that he says that our part of the agreement is to be fruitful and multiply. That means our job is to cultivate. Our job is to go out and multiply. Our job is to go spread the gospel and spread the good news and tell others about God's everlasting covenant. We are not to just consume and take part and take what people give us. We are to be the givers. That's what that means. That's the theme we start seeing. What happened with mankind before is they were not cultivating life. They were destroying life. That's why he says violence. Cain destroyed the life of his brother. It's interesting. I was driving on a Wednesday night and bringing the boys to church to Awana, and my youngest, Micah, he's 5, and he has his Bible, and he reads his Bible in the car. Now, partly he does it to try to impress his brother and to impress me because he's 5, but he's reading his Bible, and he'll read Genesis 1, and he's going through Genesis, and we get there, and he gets to the story of Cain and Abel, Genesis chapter 4. And I don't know, I see most of you have kids in the room or grandkids and siblings, but I don't know if it's an appropriate story for a 5-year-old to read a story about how the older brother kills the younger brother. I don't know if that was the appropriate story, but it's in the Bible and I'm letting him read it, right? But he says something kind of profound. He said, "What Cain did was bad, Daddy." I was like, "Yeah." He permanently took Abel's life. Yeah. Because, see, we've had to have conversations lately because he plays games. And he plays a game where you go around and in the game you eliminate people by tricking them. And in the game they call it killing. And so we've had to have a conversation about what does killing actually mean. And killing is permanent destruction. It's taking the life. And so when he says that, I was like, yeah, you're right. And that's not what God intends. God wants us to give a life. And that's why he creates this. He's reminding us that it's about life. It's not about the selfishness. It's not about the wickedness. It's not about your brokenness. It's about me and giving you life and living into that life. See, God is binding himself to humans despite their unfaithfulness, despite their wickedness, despite the fact that they're going to fail and they're going to be selfish and they're not going to uphold their end of the bargain. That's why he doesn't even put it in the covenant. He doesn't even put it in the terms. He doesn't say, I will love you as long as you're fruitful and multiply. I will love you as long as you do what I tell you to do. I will love you as long as you try to live a perfect life and find peace. I will love you if you help other people. I will love you if you do this. No, he says, I will never destroy you because I love you. What a unique perspective, because there's no other thing on this planet or in this world or in this universe that works that way. We cannot work that way. It is hard for us to love things unconditionally. We always have a condition. We can tell our kids and we can tell our family, we will love you unconditionally, but most of the time, if we're honest, that's a hard concept. Because there may be something, there's one twinge that if they did this act, we may not love them anymore. Lord knows we don't walk into a covenant and say there will be no terms. I'm just going to uphold my guard. No, we have to make sure the terms are written down. We have to make sure there's all these things. Everything's ironed out. Negotiations are in place. You have to make sure everything's clear that you're getting the most. You're not getting taken. But God says, I don't care if I'm taken. God's terms were his unconditional love for us. That was his terms. And what a reminder when Noah walks out of the flood. When he gets out of the ark. Now, this is going to be dark for a moment, but stay with me because there's going to be light coming. But when he walks out of the ark after 370 days of destruction, what is he seeing? Destruction. He is surrounded by death. It's a concept we don't like to think about, because when we see the pictures of Noah and the ark, we always see the little ark with the giraffe sticking out of it, or you see where the door open and people walking, the animals walking out, and it's all green and beautiful, but it's not. It's cloudy. It's gray. It's the sight you see right after a long flood. A couple of weeks ago, it rained for about 5 or 6 days straight, and it was dreary, and there was no happiness to be found. I found myself looking down because of all of the just drudgery that it looked like. But here he is where everything has been wiped away. So once again, not to be dark and not to take, but there's a lot of death around him. And God says, take these graves and turn them into gardens. Take these graves and turn them into life. Over 2,000 years later, what did God do again? He took a grave and he turned it to life. He took a grave and he turned it to a garden. When Jesus went to the cross, it was a dreary day, a dreary sight. And God sent his son Jesus to take on the wickedness of the world again. He needed redemption again. We could not be redeemed by ourselves. We needed something bigger. We needed something to take away the pressure and the slavery of sin. So he sends Jesus, and he goes to the cross, and he sits upon the cross for everyone to see. It wasn't hidden. He was despised. He took the violence for us again. This time, Jesus took the violence, went to a grave, took on death. 3 days later, he comes out of that grave and brings life. Life all around him where they could see it. And now when we can see a grave, we see hope, because the grave is empty. There's no body in that grave. He walks out and the angels are declaring how great and how the majesty he has. God's responsibility was not to destroy by flood, while Noah's responsibility was to respect the sacredness of life as a recognition of God. In all of this, man was to realize that without God's providence, without the constant covenant care and production of God, human life could not continue for any time at all. Just like now, we know we can't live without Jesus. We can't live a life pleasing and perfect and of peace without Jesus. He's our living hope. And just like we can see a cross and we can look at a cross, that's our symbol to remember the covenant. But God put something before the cross as a symbol of hope. Look at verse 13. I have set my rainbow in the clouds, and it will be the sign of the covenant between me and the earth. Then skip to verse 16. Whenever the rainbow appears in the clouds, I will see it and remember the everlasting covenant between God and all living creatures of every kind on earth. Now, the thing that I need is, it says he's setting the rainbow in the clouds. Clouds mean there's a storm coming. Cloud means there's darkness away. But he says, I'm going to set light into the darkness. See, we need reminders. We're forgetful people. I'm forgetful. I have to have reminders all the time. A reminder just popped up on my iPad as I was talking to remind me of something I've got to do today. We have to have reminders because we forget so often because we get caught up. And God put one there. God put a rainbow as that reminder. We have reminders in our own covenants, right? We have, with the mortgage, you have the mortgage loan. You have the paperwork that you have to file away, the title of the car. You don't get that until it's over. With marriage, you have a wedding band. I tell people all the time, that's the covenant that with marriages, when I do the premarital counseling, the wedding ring is a symbol of your love for each other. It's there for when things are tough. You can look down on your left hand, on the weakest finger of your hand, and see there's someone there to help you in the times of weakness. It's only when we forget that what that wedding band represents and the symbol of marriage and the covenant that we've come into where it's broken and we need someone to fix it. Maya Angelou said it this way. She said, God puts rainbows in the clouds so that each of us, in the dreariest and most dreadful moments, can see a possibility of hope. And that's so true. Because when it's dark and rainy, when it seems like hope is lost, we need that sense of hope. And a lot of times it comes in the form of a rainbow, maybe a physically rainbow, something that's bright and colorful. But maybe it's the rainbow through Jesus in you. Because Jesus gives us life. It gives us hope. It gives us a standard to live by. It's a reason, a symbol to fix our brokenness. Rainbow is a symbol of hope, color and darkness, and it's to remember the covenant that God is always there. It's never going to go away. It's never going to be taken from us. God's love is unconditional, truly unconditional. There's an old gospel song that I found as I was studying. It's not in any of the new hymnals. It was in this hymnal, as some people call the red hymnal. And I'm going to close with reading this song. I'm not going to sing it, but I'm going to read it because just listen. When God shut Noah in the grand old ark, he put a rainbow in the cloud. When the thunders rolled and the sky was dark, God put a rainbow in the cloud. Away down yonder in the Egyptian sand, God put a rainbow in the cloud. Just to lead his children to the promised land, God put a rainbow in the cloud. When they put old Daniel in the lion's den, God put a rainbow in the cloud. Just to prove his promise to the sons of man, God put a rainbow in the cloud. As a sign by day and a sign by night, God put a rainbow in the cloud. Just to guide his people to keep them right, God put a rainbow in the cloud. Oh, Jordan deep and unJordan wide, God put a rainbow in the cloud. To lead his people to the other side, God put a rainbow in the cloud. God put a rainbow in the cloud, yes, in the cloud. God put a rainbow in the cloud, in that cloud. When it looked like the sun wouldn't shine anymore, God put a rainbow in the cloud. If you're here today and you don't think that there's a way out, that there's hope, I'm here to tell you God put a rainbow in the cloud so that you could sense hope. Pray with me. Father, thank you for all you've given us. Thank you for your love. Thank you for your peace. Thank you for giving us a covenant that will never go away, something we can always look to and be reminded of how much you love us, how much you want to be with us, how you bind yourself to us. I pray that you will guide us, love us, and show us the hope that you have for us. Be with us as we go out. Allow us to be a hope to someone that may be in a dark time, but we can be that hope through your Son, Jesus. In your Son's name, amen.
We're glad to have you worship with us online today. If you'd like to learn more about following Jesus, or you'd like more information about Wilkesboro Baptist Church, visit our website, wilkesborobaptist.org, or you can email us, info@wilkesborobaptist.org. Again, thank you for worshiping with us.